All right, we're at the end of the session. This is Quinn and this is Remy. And as you can see, I can pet both of them. They're very comfortable because of the technique that we used above. This is a great example of dogs living in the now. Now, this is their roadmap to success. We're going to kind of summarize the things that we did during this session. We spent a lot of time in this room. This is the dog's room. I would recommend the Guardian take out the bookcase and this if we can, or at least put the thing around it. This I know will be cumbersome, but I think it will make more room for them. The dogs are in here during the day, and the Guardian has a typical 9 to 5 job, but dogs get stressed if they're in the kennel for longer than 4 hours, and it can create a negative association. I think that's part of why they don't like being in here. So, and they're old enough now where we should be able to start transitioning them to not being in the kennel. My goal is to have the dog out of the kennel. I only have kennel a dog unless I need to kennel a dog for its protection and keep my house safe or from being destroyed. So because he doesn't like going in here, we created a longing to go in here. There are a couple of treats in here. This is Remy's kennel and this is Quinn's kennel. Probably will see Remy come over here and scratch at the kennel. That's the whole point. We drop a treat in here and then he sees us drop the treat in there. And then I'm not luring him, I'm not demanding anything. He just knows it's there and he should start pawing at it. Now, one of the things I would have the Guardian do is when she does that, after he paws at it a couple times, the word for the kennel, I like using fun command words, would be Vegas. So as soon as he goes in there and licks the treat up, we're always going to say Vegas. Remember, anytime he gets a treat or affection, they should hear the command word immediately after they get the affection or the treat. So he goes in there, hears Vegas when he licks it up, and he runs out because he doesn't want to be trapped in there. This is why the Guardians hopefully will set this up. I think she's going to set this up as a doggy playpen, and that way they can be a little bit free and it'd be better for them during the day. So, and then the doors in here would be open. Wire them open during the day so they can come and go, and I'm not locked in here. If they don't go after the door, you might get a piece of plexiglass and get some Velcro tape, put it on either side, and stick it to there. That way, if they scratch in the door or your jam might get jammed up a little bit. So I practice having them in here when you're out there. So I have practice being in here, and also spend some time in here yourself with them. And then when they're nice and relaxed, or maybe give them marrow bones or something like that, and then leave the room, close the door, get a security camera, put it up on a corner somewhere, a shelf, and have it filming the room. So that way you can watch them. And that way, if you want to see, are they getting in trouble, you just go film it. Message me if you forget where to get the baby plate, or not the baby, but the playpen gates, and I can send you a link to them. But it's just nice to have a safe room to put the dogs in. And it'll be much better for them than being in the kennel, which I think is part of the why it has a negative association. So there we go. So he's interested. So when he goes in there, gets it up, and licks up, we're going to say Vegas. Then we're going to let him come out, and we're going to toss another one in with the door open. Let him go in there, say Vegas. Do that 2 or 3 times, and then leave. And then before you leave, close the door and pop 1 or 2 in there so he sees them right here on the front, and then leave. Wait a little while, wait for him to be barking and whimpering in here, and then eventually come in here. So you're going to come here several times throughout the day. Let him in there. He hears the word. No, he doesn't not forced to be in there, and it becomes a positive association. Other little tricks you can do in addition to leaving a treat with the door closed is I would recommend getting a wire kennel. Passive training. So a wire kennel allows you to see it from the top, because don't want the Guardian to let the dogs just run out of the kennel, because that's unbalanced energy. That's just too excited. These dogs develop some self-control. It's not your job to bark, that's his job. And so if we have a wire kennel, when we're letting them out, we can actually see down. Now, to let a dog out, you don't have to follow me, just stay seated, but what I do is if the dog's in the kennel, I open it, and I put my feet like this to block it, and I use this to block it. And then after a while, I can open it like this, and I take a small step back. If the dog comes forward, I rush back, is my way of saying no. And eventually, and that's why I like the wire, because I can look down and see what the dog's doing. If the dog sits, I take a big step backwards when it sits. When it sits, it's saying I'm challenging you less. So if it sits and we move further away from blocking it, that helps the dog feel like I'm getting progress. Now, the first time I do this, come here, buddy. Come. First time I do this, I toss the treat in. Well, actually, the kennel, I'll have it linked above, a kennel training exercise. But the other trick that I was going to get into is you can get if you get a wire kennel, get a marrow bone, frozen marrow bone, take a drill through the marrow, get a zip tie, and zip it to the back of the kennel somewhere on either this side or this side in the back of the kennel, and leave the door open. So then he goes in there, he can't take the marrow bone out, but he really wants to chew the marrow bone. So he's practicing being in the kennel with something good happening, and he gets to leave anytime he wants. So it's another nice little trick. Now, right now I'm ignoring him because he's demand barking, wants attention. If I chastise him, correct him, even look at his direction, I'm validating what he wants, which is my attention. This is going to be hard for the guardian because she has a tendency to shush the dogs, which is normal. But for dogs, good attention from us and bad attention from us is pretty much the same thing. So every time the dog demand barks and I give it attention, I'm validating it and making it do it more. Now, the guardian can also practice the fourth quadrant of operant conditioning, which would be if the dog demand barks, I get up and I leave the room and I close the door into the next room behind me. So the dog's saying, I want your attention. Oh, well, when you bark at me, not only do you not get my attention, but I leave the area. That's why negative punishment is what it's called, is we're removing something from the equation, in this case, the guardian. And if the dog realizes, I want something from her, but as soon as I bark, I lose her completely, well, I'm going to come up with a different strategy. And that's why we went over things like petting with a purpose and passive training. So if the dog is barking at me or nudging me or lunging or pawing, whatever, I'm going to say sit, sit. Just say the command word, not good sit, not the dog's name, sit. I'm trying to facilitate getting his nose up. When a dog feels good about itself, his nose is in the air. I want these dogs' nose to be really up. I want it snooty. People think your dogs are snooty, but they feel so good about themselves. And the more that we pet him with a purpose, after a while, instead of barking and nudging you, down. More passive training. We'll talk about that in a second. But the more that we make the dog earn its attention and affection, the more of a boost of confidence. Just like us, when we pass the bar, we have a sense of accomplishment. That these dogs are not super insecure, but they definitely could have their confidence boosted. So this way, I can't tell the human what to do. I have to ask the human. Not only do I have to ask, I have to pay for it. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling them. And I pay for it through, that would be grumble. Another passive training. But they pay for it through a commodity of obedience. After a while, what will happen is the dog will come up and start sitting in front of you to prepay for attention. We call this manding or learning to mand. The dog offers a behavior to get something in exchange from the human. And then people come over and your dog goes and sits in front of them and it's like, hey, sucker, I'm sitting down. Why are you not petting me? And your guests are like, oh my God, your dogs are so well behaved now. And you're like, of course, we hired doggone problems. But no, we're just teaching them how we want them to behave. And throughout the session, we kind of kept on touching on the subject. I think the guardian has inadvertently put the dogs in situations that they were not prepared for, that she didn't train them for. She didn't do it intentionally. Many, many people do this. But when we learn in school, we learn a skill. If we're going to read a book, we read a chapter. But before we even finish the chapter, we have sections of the chapter. And then we have quizzes on that chapter. And if we fail a quiz, our teacher usually goes back and makes us do some remedial work and catch us back up. And we don't go to the next stage till we're ready for it. When we practice things, we practice in a test environment or a classroom environment. The easiest possible scenario with only one step, and we help the dog practice that one step over and over until it's comfortable and confident. Then we move to step number 2, and then 3, 4, and then once they've done all the steps individually, then we can bring all the steps together, but again, the easiest scenario possible, but now we add another variable in. And so the guardian is very direct. And I asked her how she felt. She's like, well, good, except for we didn't do the one thing I wanted to do, which is get them to behave around other dogs. But I think that they're trying to say, I don't want that dog so close to me, and I think I'm protecting my human, or I feel vulnerable, or whatever it is. And so we have to do some behavior adjustment training. I'm hoping that we can set up a follow-up session with Sam in about a month. I want the guardian to really focus on the things that we went over inside the house. We want to build up the dog's self-esteem, build in some confidence, as well as some different flip the leader follower dynamics so the dogs feel not so insecure and they're very confident about their human. We're going to go through a lot of other things. But the more that we enforce rules, the more we pet with a purpose, the more we use passive training, the more we're teaching the dogs the things that we want them to do. Most of my clients ask them, what could your dog do to make you happy? Come. They don't know what it is. And so we need the dog, come here, buddy. Now remember to make him sit, arc over the head, lower it, say, let him lick off the treat, and then say the word sit, and then pet under the chin. Eventually, we're not always going to give him a treat, but down. But this way we can reward and get that nose up in the air like we talked about. Let me see. So passive training is, or petting with a purpose, is giving the dog a counter order. And let's say you just want to pet the dog. I'd like you to pet with a purpose as much as possible. I want to pet him. I might ask him, come here, come. I'm going to fake like I have a treat. Come. So he has to do something different to get the attention unless he prepays for it. And after a while, like I said, he'll come and sit in front of you. Now, I also would do a little bit over my coffee with a closer situation. Sit. Now that was not what I intended. I would give them both a treat for that and say sit. But if I say sit and he sits and Quinn does not, then I would give him the treat and Quinn doesn't get a treat. After a while, I create motivation for the dogs, and then they're competing to be obedient. So do this at times when they're not in the other room. Come. Whoever comes first and sits gets the treat. Whoever comes second doesn't get anything. Now they're properly motivated. Let me see. What else did we go over? We went over ways of exercising the dog. Fetch is a great way to exercise the dog. Remember, when I fetch, I say it 3 times. Down. And you can pet a dog anywhere you want. Just you want to avoid patting a dog on top of the head. They lower their nose when they have lower self-esteem, and we want these dogs to feel good about themselves. Down. Yes. And she says lay down. I would come up with some fun command words. Down is fine. You can transition it to down. But whenever for these new commands, I'd like the guardian to go to YouTube and find some new tricks and commands and try to teach the dogs, teach them separately, and then all week long practice that one trick or that one command. Next week, do the same thing. One of the ones that I have that is really helpful for my dog is very unusual. I teach my dog to back up. I call this retreat. The way I do that is through passive training, which is kind of what I've been doing here. So I was hoping you would do something I could pet you for. Passive training is just rewarding the dog anytime it does a desired action behavior. That is empty. There are no more treats left. The little that are left in the bag are going to be left so your mom can practice with you. But when I'm walking towards my dog in a hallway and my dog backs up, I'm going to say the word retreat. And it is if you come in, you're carrying stuff, the dog's in your way, you say retreat, my dog will take 4 steps backwards. Every time people see it, they're like, that is so cool. And it is. It's a directional word. Speaking of other directional commands, what we would like to do is teach the dog to leave every room on command. So I'd go around with one dog at a time, touch the nose with a treat. If this is let's say the doorway to the room is here, he's in the room, here's the hallway. I touch the dog with a treat, toss the treat about 3 feet out. When it runs out and gets it, and it licks it off the ground, I'm going to say the word out. It's going to come back in, repeat it a second time, then go to the next room. Do this throughout the house, the kitchen, the family room, everywhere. So the dog, sit. Yes. So that way that we created a vocabulary, and we can help the dog understand. When we say out, they're like, oh yeah, if I go outside, I get a treat. Exercise, I think, is going to be important because these dogs are a little under-exercised, and I think a lot of it is because of the weather, but also because he's reactive to dogs. He also is fearful. Look at that nose went up. That was great. He's reactive or fearful to trucks, certain specific trucks. So that might be something that the guardian can work on if she sees what type of truck that is. Maybe it's a UPS truck. Maybe we go to a UPS dispatch. Now what I like to do is for some counter conditioning, maybe I go between 2 buildings and I walk, and the end of the building is here. So I walk backwards. So now the dog only can see this much of the street as the trucks are passing by. Now, what I would do is then walk far enough away so that I could get the dog to sit and take a treat when a truck is passing. It might have to be 100 yards away, whatever the distance is. You find that distance, and then you help the dog practice that one distance over and over. Good job, buddy. Circle. Now, one of the things the guardian might want to do is go out and record that truck and play the audio. Because again, we talked about earlier, breaking things down in individual steps. So if we go out and record the audio of that truck passing, then we have a good stereo right here. It actually has a cassette player. So we go out there and we play it at volume 1 while the dog is eating a treat. And then after we practice that for a minute or two, and then we go do other things. And we come back a little bit later and we play it at volume 2. And each time we do it, it gets progressively louder. And if the dog ever stops taking the treat or won't sit, then we push too far. Back up a volume or increase the distance or slow down the speed so that we're going to put the dog in position to succeed. Once we get to the point where we have the truck, it sounds like it's literally in the room, then the next stage would be maybe you go to the center like I was talking about, find an alley along the path that the vans are going to pass by, walk far enough away where we can get them to sit, squish that treat like I showed in the above video, have him chewing on it, and here's the passage, the van's going this way, I'm going to have the dog looking here, and then as it passes, I'm going to look at the treat. So it's going to be watching as it goes. And as soon as the van passes, this is important, the treat goes away. So because when the van is passing, the dog doesn't like that. Mm-hmm. This is the definition of counter conditioning. So we're countering and creating a new condition. So, I sound like a kid who didn't read the book. Read the book. I just read the cover. But what we want is when the thing that I don't want is happening, I'm getting a treat. When the thing that I want to happen, the truck is leaving, the treat goes away. After a while, can we get some more UPS trucks? I like getting these treats. And it's just a replacement behavior. So let me see, what else? Passive training is just, like I said, recognizing anytime the dog does the thing that you want it to do on its own. No, we're not luring it, we're not egging it on, we're not nudging it, just every time the dog lays down, we pet it and say down. Every time the dog brings me the purple thing, I say purple thing, or name all the toys. Every time he comes organically on his own, come. A lot of us use the dog's commands in a negative way. He's having a great time yelling at the squirrel. We don't want the neighbors to hear it, so we say, come. He comes inside, we close the dog door. I was just having a great time. I listened to you, and now the fun is over. I'm not listening to you again. But if 100 times a day he comes to me, I say, pet him and say, come. And then the one time that happens, that's 1%. I'm willing to continue trying to do that. Sit. And now the dogs know what it can do to make us happy. And you can come up with something, maybe you call that, down is lay down, and flop is when they go on the side. And you can tell, like I said, they were both really flop. There you go, buddy. But come up with fun command words. The more that we bring some some levity in the situation, the more beneficial it can be. Let me see, what else? I'm trying to think. We talked about converting this into a I can't wait to do. We had to redo this video. Make sure you take the stuff out of here so that we have as much room as possible for the dogs. It should be full of nothing but appropriate dog toys. And the first several times you put them in there, give them some bully sticks. Go to the green spot. Remind me to give you a card for the green spot. The guardian works nearby. And go get some cod skin, some marrow bones. I wouldn't necessarily want them on the carpet because they might get a little bit funky. But a bully stick would be fine. Mm-hmm. Or a cod skin, or a trachea, or a kneecap. And so you give them those two things, and you close the door, and you leave. You don't leave the house, you just leave the room. And maybe sit in your bedroom, which is just right next door, and listen, or watch them in the security camera. If they come and whimper at the door, make sure you always wait at least 2 seconds of no whimpering before you open the door. We don't have to think the whimpering or scratching at the door will get me out. Now, if they scratch at the door, get yourself some plexiglass. You could probably cut the little door stopper thing around it and get some Velcro tape, put it on the door, and that way if they scratch, it won't be scratching the actual door. But we don't want to respond when they're doing that. The other thing the guardian happens to do a lot is when they're barking, she shushes them. And the problem with that is good attention from us and bad attention from us is the same thing. So to teach the dogs not to bark, what I recommend is you can't teach off unless you first teach on. So when the dog is barking, I would use passive training. Every time the dog barks, say speak. Bark, speak. Don't do this when it's demand barking, but it's barking at the squirrel or something like that. Speak. And after you can do that, so you can command the dog. There we go. Dog. Again, we're assigning words. So once you can say speak and the dog speaks on command, then you say speak, it barks, and you give it a treat and say speak. Then you say silent. So at first just like a second or 2 seconds of silence. Then speak, speak, silent, silent. Now 3 seconds. So we're gradually going to progressively elongate that, and now we put in context and they understand what that means, and then they might not necessarily be willing to acquiesce, but they do understand what we mean after we've done that enough. Now, a lot of times, and this is great, this is when we would want to let him in, but we want to save this for later. But a lot of times when dogs dig outside, they're doing it because they're bored. Under-exercising dogs can be a big issue for digging. So if they dig, fill the hole back up, put a little bit of both of their poop in the hole about an inch below the surface. They will not dig in that area again. Do they have any toys outside?
Yes.
So toys are great, but maybe playing fetch outside with them. If they get nuisance, demand barking, wait for them to stop barking. If you can, go out and play fetch. We also remember get a laser. Remember not to only click. Remember you click it several times without the battery in or without laser dot appearing, so they don't associate it. And every once in a while, pull it out and go like this around the room and around the backyard, so they don't associate it. If they ever look at it, it's immediately stop it, so they don't ever see the dot there. But don't use the laser too much because you'll only have so much throughput of that, and then eventually they'll stop going for it. But teaching them to fetch, there's something called an eye fetch, and there's actually a go dog go. I have a dog that will fetch until she literally cannot breathe. She literally will walk into a wall. She's almost asphyxiated. I have to stop her. But she can go play fetch with herself for hours, and she puts it in the machine. She hears the spring going back. It launches it, and she runs, and she snatches it out of the air. Then she runs back, and she drops it in the bucket, spindles down, and 7 seconds later, it spits it out. So it allows the dog to play fetch by itself. Go dog go is my preferred one. I've done a couple different ones. That's the best. Now what I do to train them is I have a treat when the dog brings it over to me. If this is where the bucket is, I hold the treat over the bucket. When the dog opens his mouth to take the treat, it drops in the bucket. I would say the word machine, or I say bucket, whatever the word is you do, you pop it in their mouth. After a while, the dog would come, you say bucket, and he does it, and after a while, they'll do it by themselves. So these are both very smart dogs. So I think they'll start doing it faster and faster. If they have a dog door, we would love to get to the point where they are free during the day and we trust them in the house. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then they take themselves outside and play fetch on their own.
That'd be great.
Now for the guardian kennels them during the day while she's at work, which is too long. Like I said, anything longer than 4 hours we don't like. So we'd like to do that, avoid that. But we would like to right now let them start being out at night. And I would close the door to the room and have the kennel doors wired open so they can practice being in here with the comfort of knowing the guardian's here. And this is when we sleep anytime. So they get practice sleeping in here in a calm way. They might sleep on the carpet here, that's fine. But eventually we would allow them to have access to this room. We put a baby gate at the end of the hallway and close all the other doors that they can have access to. So now they have access to this room after they've had about a week of being access to the room without destroying anything and misbehaving. I know, buddy. And then we allow them to have the hallway. And if they go a couple days a week without messing up that, then we open the guardian's bedroom door as well. So dogs can come in there. And then we gradually ration out that access points until the dogs eventually have full reign of the house at night. And then they practice not doing unwanted behaviors at night, and they practice that enough, then we start leaving the house for limited periods of time. And at first, maybe you just go out the door and come back in. And do that several times. So it's just like, man, sometimes she just leaves and comes right back in. And every time she leaves the door doesn't mean guaranteed that she's leaving. One of the things I'd like the guardian to teach is how to stay. Now, I'm guessing she probably has already done this a little bit. If you teach your dog to stay, you should teach it for the 3 Ds. Most teach their dog an auto release. Stay, and they start walking away, and then say, come. So you're teaching the dog. So I have a stay and I have a wait for my dogs. Stay means stay until you are a specific release word, and I would have one for each dog. I can have 4 dogs in a stay. Say release, break, freedom, or parole. I like fun words. And only that dog comes. So I can actually release just one of the dogs because they only have their own unique word. So at first I just tell the dog to stay when it's sitting right in front of me. Stay, 1, treat, stay. Stay, 2 seconds, treat, stay. And keep doing that until you get to 5 minutes with the dog staying right in front of you. And that's hard for a dog. Why are you not giving me a treat? What do you want me to do? Nothing. That's kind of hard. Once you get them to stay for 5 minutes, that's when I start incorporating distance. Put the dog to stay. Take 1 step back. I count to 2, and then I come back and I give the dog the treat and I say stay. One last thing is before each, so you might practice 5 or 6 or 10 stays. The last stay, you should touch the dog's nose with a treat and toss the treat to the side. When the dog trops over to get it, you would say break, freedom, parole, whatever the word is that you want to use. And now the dog knows that is my release word. My wait command is very similar, but wait means wait until you get the next command. Stay means stay until you hear one specific release command. So when I fly with my dog Quest, I go through security, take my stuff off, wait, take his stuff off, run through security. When they call me through, I say here, and then he runs through. So it's hard for a lot of people don't need to have that specific, but this guardian does such a great job with training. Grumble, passive training. That I think that it'd be really beneficial, and that's a great exercise to develop self-control. Now you see we have a little bit of demand barking, so the dogs think that they can tell the human what to do at least some of the time. Now we went through a long structured feeding ritual, and the guardian's like, but I don't have a problem with this, but it's a very important activity for dogs. So the guardian's going to eat first, the dog's going to leave the room, we're going to put down. We're going to put the food in the bowls, and then he's going to eat for whoever's behaving best is going to eat first. I would probably get a habit of feeding him. He seems to be a little bit better behaved than him. But I would like to reward good behavior. So if he's being a pistol, then I would bump him up and he gets to come in. They have different command words, and eventually you'll be able to have them stay outside the kitchen, and then you say whatever their command word is, he runs in, and when he hears feast or chow or whatever his word is. Now we talked about enforcing rules consistently. Enforcing rules gives us an opportunity to act like a leader in the dog's perspective. So remember, burning energy is important. If you're not burning the energy to stand up or follow through, you really don't mean it. So one of the rules, not being allowed in the furniture, if they get up, I'm going to stand up and say off. As soon as the dog gets off, I would pet them and say off. So again, create a motivation to get down. And then at that point, I'm going to block them if they try to get back up again. I like to give them a dog bed at the same time, and I use the dog bed the same way I kind of train them to do this. Put a dog bed in front of the TV, sit there and have a treat, and just toss it on the dog bed. When they go over and lick it up, maybe we call that one Venice. And then and you might have to do it with one dog at a time, but eventually, the first way I toss it. Second way is I just leave one there and try to get a light colored dog bed. Dogs are colorblind, so blue and green is kind of their wheelhouse. So I like to get a light cream or a white colored dog bed. prefer the ones on Groupon because I find they're cheapest. I get the memory foam ones, the one that's a square or rectangular foam. That way you can take the shell out and it holds the shape. If I have like the duvet cover, I might put a treat on it. They might not see it under a ridge. Flap. And so basically, I toss it, let them get it, and say the word Venice. I leave one there when they come in and discover it. I don't put it out when I say Venice. And the third way, I might lead them over there and give them a treat for sitting or laying down and say Venice. And then after a while, now they'll start going there on their own. If they do, pull out a treat, toss it toward the dog, and say Venice. Try to toss it so they stay on the dog bed. I would get a dog bed that's big enough for both of them. Get the XL or the large, or probably the Jumbo or XL on Groupon. And for me, I get a lot of pleasure watching my dogs sleep together. But if we take away the furniture, that way they have a status place. They have dog beds out there, but they're separate. And I would like them, they're siblings, so I don't think they'll have a problem being together. Flap. Other rules. Not being allowed within 7 feet of a human who's eating. If the dog door is down, if the dog wants to go outside, it has to sit. I go to the door and I say sit once. If the dog doesn't sit, now you guys are being too cute. If I say sit and they don't sit, I walk away for 1 minute and sit down somewhere else. If they demand bark, I ignore. Come back after 1 minute. And then tell them, and literally tell them, the guardian has asked, can you sit? And she leaned over, can you sit? And he actually did, but a lot of times they're like, no, I cannot. So tell them, and this time if they don't sit within 2 or 3 seconds, I'm only gonna say it once. The more you say a command, the less you mean it. So after they don't sit, I walk away for 2 minutes. Next time for 4 minutes. Next time for 8 minutes. So I keep on doubling the length of time. And because I am in control of now the resource that they want, I have more motivation and leverage for them to listen to me. This is a great way to train your dog without using treats, by putting something the dog wants after it has to do something for you first. Come. Yes. Let me see. Try to avoid talking to your dog too much. This is a little bit to close proximity, but I'm about to leave and I'm going to take it. But remember, one-word commands, and say just the command word, not good or good girl or good boy. Saying good girl doesn't hurt you, or good boy in this case, but it doesn't help you because the dog already knows you're pleased. You're petting them, you're giving them attention. So if you just say whatever the command word is, come. Now, when I say come, he's much more inclined to want to come. Let me see. We went through structured feeding. I'm trying to think. Sam, I'm hoping we set up, like I said, a session where we can work on the dog behavior stuff, reactivity to other dogs, using some behavior adjustment training, and Sam is awesome. That way we teach the dogs a better way to deal with this. If you don't want to deal with it, the dog, as you move away from the dog. But I threw a lot at the guardian here, and I want her to really focus on these things first. A couple other little things. Make sure you always follow through. If the dog is standing your way, don't walk around. And if the dog is sleeping, you can walk around it. But if it's standing your way, walk through it as if it's not even there. And that way the dog learns when the humans come in, I need to defer, because leaders defer to followers. Or followers defer to leaders, not the other way around. Remember to use the escalating consequences. First thing I do is I hiss 1 time per incident. Don't go ch-ch-ch-ch. 1 time per incident. Second thing is, and that's a warning before they do the wrong thing. Come. Second thing is, I abruptly stand up and turn to face the dog. Keep your belly button pointed at the dog. And keep pivoting as the dog pivots around the room. Keep your authority pointed at that dog until the dog stands, sits, or lays down, or leaves the room completely. As soon as it sits, take 2 steps backwards, left, right, and pause for 1 second. The pause is like a period at the end of a sentence. And then go back to doing what you're doing. Come. The third consequence is to march directly at the dog until it turns sideways or greater away from you. Crash, or down, excuse me. Lay down. And march directly towards the dog with some steam in your step. The guardian, she was doing this when we were feeding, was a little bit slow, and she slowed down as she approached the dog. So the dog didn't think, I'm going to get my butt run over if I'm still here. I better skedaddle and get out of the way. And the more they get used to doing that, the more they see, well, she ain't messing around. That's why you have to always outlast your dog. And then the only time I don't stop is if they're in the middle of a no dog zone. So let's say the dog is here and I'm eating food. Well, it's not supposed to be within 7 feet. So I get up and march at it and it turns sideways here. Well, it's not supposed to. It's still supposed to be further than that. I would bump into the dog, keep bumping into the dog till it got to the boundary. And that's where I stop enforcing it. If the dog tries to go around this way, I step to the side and block it. Goes this way, I step to this side and block it. If it steps one more time, now I step forward and to the side. After 2 side to sides, I'm moving forward. You're going to move further away from your target. And then the fourth one is the leash timeout. If you forget any of those, let me know, message me, and I can go over those with you. Now, the guardian does have a nice target, is that what you call it? Touch. exercise. And touch exercise is a great way to redirect the dog. And that's why the more exercise we get, if the dogs demand barking, wait for a second or two between, touch. And then go over and do a focus exercise. Practice rollover, practice flop, or whatever it is. And the more that you do these things, the better you're redirecting your dog's attention, and it helps them. Now, like I said, if they, I can't remember if I went through this or not, but fill up the hole that they dig in the backyard with dirt. Okay. Let me see. Doggy daycare, we'd like to take them to doggy daycare independently, but we have to take care of his issues with dogs first. Man, why am I already blanking his name?
Remy.
Remy, thank you.
Sure.
Your name is Quinn. I remember that one. I have a Q name dog, Quest. Oh, one last thing. I have a naughty dog name for my dog. My dog's name is Quest. If I tell him to sit and he doesn't sit, I say, Rufus. He sits down right away. Rufus means you're about to get into trouble. So come up with because otherwise we're like, our dog's doing the wrong thing. We're like, Remy, in a good way. Remy. It confuses the dog. So come up with a ridiculous sounding name because you're going to say it Jebediah or something like that when the dog you're going to be cross with the dog. But now if you always say Trump or whatever the word is that you want to say whenever the dog does the wrong thing, after a while, now Remy means good things and Trump or Putin or whatever the word is means something bad. And that helps you have, and again, fun command words. So don't use Trump if you like Trump, but use whatever you like. I'm not aspiring. Let me see, what else? I think that's about it. Like I said, I try to summarize this as best as possible. Now, if you have questions, I want you to text me. Don't wait. The sooner you text me, I don't want you to practice something the wrong way. So I'm like this for all my clients. This is why I have over 100 5-star reviews here, because I really do care about what I'm doing. And I take pride in my work, and I want you guys to feel like you have a support system. So the guardian who likes watching the Dog Whisperer, a lot of people think is dog psychology. It is not. It's the old way of training. It's force. And we don't want to force our dog. We want to just reward the good things for coming, like you just came. And I should have said the word come. See, I'm giving an example of what not to do. Can I get a kiss? Yeah, I see where you put your lips. I don't want them on my lips myself. On your tongue. All right. Well, this is Remy and Quinn's over there, and this is their roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.